Hey, what's up, guys? I just wanted to get in today. I want to discuss with Peter, who I work with, basically what the best program language to start with, to start learning is. To give you a bit of background, I did a Java bootcamp, then I got my first job as a PHP developer. Then I went back into Java, then back into PHP. Then I got hired as a Clojure developer, and then back into PHP. And now I'm working full-time JavaScript. I don't know if you want to give a bit of a summary of your experience, Peter.
Yeah, so at a university, I think there we did some JavaScript and mostly C++. Then I was working in C and C++ for about 7 years. Then moved over to Python, Ruby, PHP, a little bit of JavaScript and Clojure. Yeah, so quite a mix.
Okay, so there's a fair amount of mix there. I think so. We both worked in OO, procedural, and functional code. I'm sure we can say procedural code. You gotta do it.
At least once.
Yeah, so I suppose a good place to start with is like, say you have no programming experience. What do you think like a good language to get into is? I know I have my opinion. I want to hear what yours is first.
So, so when you said we must talk about sort of what languages, especially that I like, that is the question of like every blog post in my feed these days. Like, this is the top 10 languages to learn, this month. It's so annoying because like a lot of time they just pull from the Stack Overflow stats on like what is the most used language. So like, JavaScript is the most used, so definitely you should learn that, So I think for me, as a more experienced developer, a language is a means to an end. It's not, your skill is not, oh, I'm a, PHP developer or something. I'm a web developer and I use, a lot of languages, maybe PHP and JavaScript mix. So I think for me, it's important to know, like, what is it that you want out of the programming skill that you're building up. So if you want to do web, you've got to do JavaScript because that is the main programming language there. If you come from sort of an analytical background and you want to do some data crunching, then I'd say something like R, or Python is a good place to start. If you want to do machine learning stuff, definitely Python is a good place to start. So yeah, I think that's sort of my opinion. If you want to do like high performance, low level stuff, maybe embedded, then C, C++, maybe Rust, stuff like that.
But like, don't you think like when you start learning programming, it's like you don't know, like, yeah, I'm gonna get into high, like embedded, like micro applications. You don't know that from the start. And I don't know, like it's hard for someone from the very beginning. Like I'm sure everyone wants to learn game development, and then they're like, okay, I got to learn C++, and then they realize, game development is not as fun as making games, as playing games.
Yeah.
And they're like, I do like programming. Then it's like better to learn something else. So
yeah,
like
so I mean, definitely, I hear what you're saying. Like, often you don't know what you want to. You don't really know what you're going to be doing and what you want to do. So I think for me, I would always recommend Python as like a general purpose, good, solid programming language to learn the basics of programming. I think that is a very solid place to start. I think JavaScript has a lot of weirdness and is actually not so mainstream. If you think like every language is like JavaScript, then it's going to be a bit off base. So yeah, I think something like Python gives you a better measured sort of approach and introduction to programming.
I agree with that. Like when I first started programming, like Python was seen as like, you'll never do anything serious with Python, so don't learn it. And nowadays it's like everyone wants Python developers. But I actually recommend like a language. I'm super happy that I started with Java because you get, even though I hate Java, like now I would really avoid using it because I don't enjoy writing it. It does teach you a lot about strict typing, about compiling, about performance with multi-threading, and it gives you an overview which you won't get from a language like JavaScript. You'll never you'll never start running multiple threads in JavaScript, so you won't even understand how to make a thread pool or anything like that.
Yeah.
And there's and the classes, and because it's so OO, you learn object orientation, like object oriented programming properly. And another problem with like a language like JavaScript is that it is super weird. Like you have that, and the way it works is where some of it runs in JavaScript, some of it runs in like the web API, and you have those callbacks, and like it's a really weird language. And when you first start out, I don't think people actually realize how weird it is because you don't know what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I absolutely agree with that. I think another language that you could also, if you want a really good introduction to sort of programming in general, slightly more hardcore, then C++ is also something I would recommend. Just doing memory management, just gives you a whole new appreciation for the computer that you're working with, the limitations that there are, and the things you do, how that impacts performance. And that translates through two languages with their own memory management. You just have an intuition of, if I'm going to be recurring this thing 1,000 times, that might not be the best idea, which I think is also valuable.
Yeah, and also like I think it gives you, when I moved from Java to PHP, it gave me a huge appreciation for like what PHP is. And I think a lot of people give PHP like it has a bad rep because most of the time you're going to be working on it. I think the code was written by someone more junior, so people put that bad code as bad language because you're allowed to do a lot. It's way more flexible than something like Java. But it gives you an appreciation for how quickly you can do things in a different language. Especially, I've never written in C++, and I know that is more hardcore than Java, and I would appreciate Java from using C++.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%. I think like I was fiddling around with WordPress over the weekend, and PHP in WordPress is just horrible. It's like totally spaghetti, and the way it's just designed is just crazy. But PHP can get away with that because it's so flexible. But that is not how you would build normal, PHP applications and things like that. So I think, languages can have a bad rep, especially, if they've been traditionally used for something specific. But you can get a lot of value out of more dynamic languages like PHP, Python, Ruby, stuff like that.
Yeah. I also think it's a good when you're starting to learn to program, just learn one language and learn it well and understand the concepts of the language and what you're doing rather than just syntax. Because the truth is that you're going to be doing the same thing in another language. That's why like JavaScript is weird, because you don't always do the same thing. But you're going to be doing basically the same thing in another language, just with a slightly different syntax. And if you understand the concepts, which you will after time, then you'll be in you'll have a much stronger footing, like learning another language.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Every language has their own take and design decisions they make. And I think it's very important, like you say, to understand where the language is coming from, what it's trying to achieve. And that'll also help you write better code. For instance, Python is like, there's only one way to do things, so all of the code is very standardized. So you really shouldn't be doing all sorts of weird and clever things. They're very opposed to that. So, I think understanding a lot of that kind of thing will help you, work with the language and understand the language better. And if you want to learn a new language, like make sure you get into what that language is about, the design decisions that went into that language. Like if you're working with Clojure, understand that, immutable data structures is one of the main things that they bring to the party. So don't try and do all sorts of weird imperative stuff. You're just going to be fighting the language. I think that's also important to understand where the language is coming from and not just pretend like all the languages are the same,
Yeah. Also, like, I think actually thinking about it now, Golang would also be a cool one to start off with and to learn, because I think it has paradigms from multiple languages and you can see, okay, this is where they're going here, or this is where they're going there. But except for the multiple return, I don't think that's very common.
No. But definitely their typing system, things like that is very traditional, I think, and very emphasized. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that was a cool little chat. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think that be careful of what people say you should learn, especially if it's based on what language is commonly used. There's a lot of languages commonly used, but it's not necessarily something you want to work in. So be very mindful of that. For instance, Java. If you're not going to be doing a lot of Java, then you know uh, you know and people say learn Java, because a lot of people use. Just be very careful of that, and always keep in mind sort of what domain, if you have any sort of inclination of the domain you want to work in. Languages work in different domains. Try and figure out what languages will work best in the domain that you think you're going to be finding yourself in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, if you're going to be using something like Unity, because you want to do game development, learn C#. There's like nothing wrong with that. Yeah, exactly. And I suppose my final thoughts are just find a language, stick to it, and try and learn the hard parts. Like, go over the hard parts. When it gets difficult, that's when you're really learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool,
Man. Cheers.